You walk away from a car crash that should have killed you. The odds were impossible, yet here you are. What if that was not just luck, but a fundamental rule of your existence? What if you never truly die? This is the startling premise of the quantum immortality thought experiment, a mind-bending idea where physics, philosophy, and pure mystery collide. By the end of this journey, you will see reality and your own life through an entirely new and unsettling lens. We will explore how your consciousness might cheat death forever, and what it means if every version of you that dies simply vanishes from your point of view. So, are you ready to question the very nature of your own story? Quantum immortality is not a promise of invincibility. You are not a superhero. Your body is still fragile. The idea is far stranger. It proposes that your conscious experience, the feeling of being you, can never encounter its own end. According to this view, every time your life is threatened, the universe splits. In one branch, you meet a fatal end. In another, you survive by sheer chance. Your consciousness, the thread of your personal experience, follows the path where you continue. From your subjective point of view, you always end up in the reality where you are still alive to tell the tale. The other versions of you, the ones who did not make it, simply cease to be a part of your story. Think of it as the ultimate cosmic version of a choose-your-own-adventure book, where you only ever get to read the pages where the main character, which is you, survives to the next chapter. You never turn to the page that says the story is over. This is the heart of the thought experiment. It takes the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, where every possible outcome of every event actually happens in its own separate reality, and applies it to the most personal event imaginable, your own death. The result is a perspective where death, for the conscious observer, becomes an experience that is always witnessed by someone else, never by you. The engine for this strange possibility lies in a radical interpretation of quantum physics. To understand how you might never experience death, we must first look at the idea that reality itself is constantly dividing. This is the many worlds interpretation proposed by a physicist named Hugh Everett in the 1950s. It begins with the bizarre rules of the quantum world, where particles exist in a haze of possibilities until they are observed. The famous thought experiment of Schrödinger's cat illustrates this perfectly. A cat is placed in a sealed box with a device that has a 50% chance of releasing poison. According to traditional quantum theory, until you open the box, the cat exists in a superposition, a blurred state of being both alive and dead at the same time. Your observation is what forces it to become one or the other. But Everett's many worlds interpretation rejects this idea of a single outcome forced by observation. Instead, it proposes that at the moment the quantum event happens, the universe itself splits. In one perfectly real branch of reality, the device does not trigger and the cat lives purring happily. In another equally real branch, the device activates and the cat dies. Both outcomes occur, but in separate, non-communicating universes that have just diverged from one another. There is no single reality that collapses into one state. There are only more and more realities branching off with every possible quantum event. Every flip of a coin, every random decay of an atom, every choice you make creates new worlds. This is the foundational engine that could power quantum immortality. If every possible outcome of every event is realized somewhere, then for every fatal accident, there must exist a branch where, against all odds, you survive. Your conscious experience simply follows that one thread. This branching reality leads us to a chilling mental device, a machine designed to test the limits of subjective experience. It is called the quantum suicide device. Picture a simple but grim setup. A scientist sits before a contraption. It contains a gun pointed directly at them. The trigger is not pulled by a person, but by a truly random quantum event, like the decay of a single radioactive atom within a set time. The rules are stark. If the atom decays, the gun fires. If it does not decay, the gun merely clicks. The odds are exactly 50-50 each time the experiment runs. From the perspective of any outside observer, this is a brutal game of chance. They would watch multiple trials. In roughly half of them, they would see the scientist die. In the other half, they would see the scientist survive, relieved after hearing the harmless click. The statistics are clear and tragic from this outside view, but now shift your perspective to the scientist in the chair. They are the conscious subject, the one experiencing the experiment from the inside. They pull the lever for the first trial. The quantum event happens. They hear a click. They are alive. They pull the lever again. Another click. They survive once more. They repeat this process 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times. From their seat, they only ever hear the click. They never experience the bullet. According to the logic of quantum immortality, their conscious experience is forever tied to the branching realities where the random quantum event spared them. In the other branches, versions of them died, but from their singular, subjective point of view, those branches do not exist. All they know is an unbroken string of survival, a seemingly miraculous run of luck that defies all probability. The outside observer sees a tragedy half the time. The person in the chair experiences a bizarre, endless reprieve. This stark difference in perspective is the entire point of the thought experiment. It forces us to ask, what is reality for the conscious observer? Is it the statistical truth seen from the outside, or is it the uninterrupted stream of experience from within? The quantum suicide machine is not a blueprint for a real experiment, thank goodness. It is a stark philosophical tool, a way to isolate the terrifying implication that if the many worlds interpretation is correct, then from your own point of view, you might be functionally immortal, destined to always find yourself in a world where you continue, no matter how slim the odds. From the chair of the quantum suicide device, the scientist hears only clicks. This is the unshakable core of the idea, the rift between two kinds of truth. Objectively, if we could somehow step outside the multiverse and view all its branches, we would see a tragic tapestry. In countless realities, that scientist died on the first trial. In many more, they died on the 10th or the 100th. Statistically, versions of them are gone, but subjectively, from within the single thread of experience that feels like being them, none of that matters. Their consciousness is not a spectator to those other branches. It is a participant, forever riding the one path where survival, however improbable, occurs. Your personal immortality, in this view, is a profound illusion to everyone else, but the only persistent reality you will ever know. This creates a deep and unsettling philosophical tension, a kind of solipsism woven into the fabric of physics. Solipsism is the idea that only one's own mind is sure to exist. Quantum immortality twists this into a cosmic rule. It suggests that while other people and worlds are real, the version of them you interact with is always the one compatible with your continued existence. From your point of view, you are the central character in a story that simply cannot include your final page. Everyone else in your life, however, appears to live and die according to normal statistics. You might watch loved ones pass away, their stories concluding in your reality, but your own end remains a door you never walk through, a curtain you never see fall. This leads to a strange and lonely question. If this is true, are you ultimately alone in your immortality? Is your stream of consciousness the one constant in a swirling multiverse where every other being you meet is a temporary fellow traveler in your particular branch of survival? The implications ripple out into how we perceive luck, fate, and even history. Think of those incredible stories of people surviving against impossible odds, the sole survivor of a plane crash, the person who switched train cars minutes before derailment. In a single worldview, these are breathtaking strokes of fortune, but through the lens of quantum immortality, they are necessary events. For that conscious survivor, there was never an alternative outcome they experienced. The branches where they perished are real, but they are not that person's story. This does not make the survivor special in a traditional sense. It simply means their consciousness is bound to a narrative thread where such miraculous escapes are part of the plot. It reframes history itself not as a single line of events, but as the personal, subjective pathway of every conscious observer, each following their own unbroken chain of survival through the branching multiverse. The tension lies in holding both truths at once, the objective chaos of infinite endings and the subjective certainty of your own continuing tale. But this leads us to a crucial and chilling question. Does quantum immortality mean you will literally live forever? The answer, according to the strict logic of the thought experiment, is both yes and no in the most unsettling way possible. The mechanism we have described only applies to events that have a probability of killing you. It requires a branching point, a moment where the universe can split into one reality where you die and another where you, against the odds, survive. Your consciousness follows the survival branch. This works wonderfully for accidents, disasters, or even the quantum gun. But what about processes that are not a matter of chance? What about the slow, inevitable creep of time itself? Aging, in our current understanding, is not a probabilistic event. It is a biological process, a deterministic march of decay that affects every cell in your body. If aging is truly a fixed, non-random process, then there may be no quantum branch where your 90-year-old body suddenly becomes 20 again. The many worlds interpretation might not offer an escape from a fate that is written into your very biology. So, in one sense, quantum immortality could have a final limit. You might survive every car crash and every illness, only to eventually succumb to extreme old age in a reality where you become the oldest person who has ever lived. Yet, even here, the thought experiment finds a strange and slippery loophole. Is aging truly 100% deterministic, or are there countless tiny, random events at the cellular and molecular level that influence how we age? If there is any quantum randomness involved in the process of decay, then perhaps there are branches where your body deteriorates slightly slower, where a crucial cell repair happens successfully against the odds. This opens the door to a profoundly eerie possibility. You might not live forever, but you could live for a very, very long time. Imagine surviving into a future where medical science has advanced just enough to extend life by another century. From your perspective, you would simply be the beneficiary of remarkable timing. But in the branching multiverse, you are the version of yourself who happened to be born into the precise sequence of realities where each breakthrough arrived just in time to save you. You could find yourself at 200 years old, then 500, witnessing civilizations rise and fall, all because your conscious thread weaved through an unbroken chain of survival branches. You would become a living anomaly, a person of impossible age, not because you were immune to time, but because you forever existed in the reality where the next life-extending discovery was made. The ultimate limit might then become not biology, but the cosmos itself. Could you survive the heat death of the universe, the final fading of all energy and possibility? That is a frontier where even this strange logic may finally break down, leaving you alone in an infinite, silent darkness, the last conscious thought in a dead reality, still unable to experience your own end. This solitude at the end of time reveals a deeper, more intimate paradox. We have been speaking of your consciousness as a single, unbroken thread, forever following the path of survival. But what exactly is this thread? What constitutes the you that is supposedly immortal? The many worlds interpretation suggests that with every quantum decision, reality splits and a new version of you is born in a new branch. So, when you narrowly avoid that car crash, there is a version of you in another reality that did not. Which one is the real you? The answer, unsettlingly, might be both. From the moment of the split, they are equally real and equally you, just beginning to accumulate different experiences. This shatters our simple idea of identity. We think of ourselves as a continuous line from birth to the present, a single story. But if physics is constantly forking that path, then you are not one line, you are the root of an ever-expanding tree. The concept of identity continuity, the feeling that you are the same person who woke up this morning, becomes a profound illusion. It is an illusion generated by the fact that you only have access to the memories and experiences of one single branch at a time. You remember the near miss with the car. The other you, in the branch where the crash happened, does not remember it because for them it was not a miss. Their story ended there, so are you meaningfully the same as that other you? At the moment of the split, you are identical in every way. A millisecond later, you are not. You have the memory of a close call, they do not. You are already different people. This means the you that survives 1,000 quantum suicide trials is not the same you who sat down in the chair at the beginning. That original person, in a philosophical sense, is gone, replaced at each split by a new consciousness that inherits all the memories of survival. You feel continuous because each new version receives the complete mental record of the one that came before it in that specific branch. It is like a candle lighting another candle. The flame is not the same collection of molecules, but the light appears unbroken. This touches directly on the hard problem of consciousness, the mystery of why and how we have subjective experience at all. If consciousness is just a pattern of information, then it can be copied. Both branches contain a perfect copy of your pattern at the moment of the split. Both would swear they are the original, continuous self. From the outside, there is no way to tell which is which. From the inside, each copy simply is. So, your immortality may not be the survival of a single, precious self, but the endless replication of a pattern that always believes it is the original. You are not cheating death, you are being replaced over and over by a successor who has all your memories and is convinced they have always been you. The thread is not a thread, it is a chain of perfect copies, each one believing it is the only link. This reframes the entire experiment. It is not about preserving you, it is about preserving the illusion of you. And that illusion may be the only thing any of us have ever known. The chain of perfect copies leads to a scenario so extreme it defies every instinct about luck and probability. Let us escalate the quantum suicide experiment to its most visceral form. Instead of a simple 50-50 device, picture a cosmic game of Russian roulette. But this is no ordinary revolver. Imagine a gun with 1 million chambers, and every single one is loaded except for a single, solitary, empty slot. The cylinder spins with a truly random quantum mechanism. You place the barrel against your temple and pull the trigger. The odds are 999,999 to 1 that you die instantly. From any outside perspective, this is not a game. It is a statistical certainty of death. Any observer would see you try this once, and in nearly every single branching reality, they would witness a tragedy. They would see you try it 100 times, and the result would be 100 funerals across the multiverse. The statistics are brutally clear, but now step into the chair. You are the one holding the gun. You pull the trigger. There is a deafening click, not a bang. You are alive. You spin the cylinder again. The quantum randomizer resets, and you pull the trigger a second time. Another click. You do this a third time, a 10th time, a 100th time. From your seat, you only ever hear the harmless click. You survive every single attempt. According to the logic we have traced, your conscious experience is forever anchored to the 1 in a million branch where the empty chamber aligns every single time. You are not defying the odds, you are simply the version of yourself that exists in the vanishingly slim sliver of reality, where such a continuous miracle is the only possible outcome you can experience. This is where the thought experiment reaches its most disorienting peak. It transforms a statistical certainty of death, something that is objectively true from the outside, into a subjective impossibility for you. From your point of view, you are not lucky, you are inevitable. the feeling would not be one of beating the odds, but of existing in a universe where the odds are meaningless for your personal narrative. It would feel less like physics and more like a supernatural miracle, a divine protection or a glitch in the matrix. This highlights the profound rift between the map and the territory. The map, the objective statistics, says you are a ghost. The territory, your lived reality, says you are simply alive, wondering why the gun never seems to fire. This forces a haunting question about the nature of evidence itself. If you were this immortal participant, what would you conclude? After surviving 100 pulls of the million-chambered gun, you would have empirical proof in your own lived experience that you cannot be killed by it. The scientific method, based on repeatable observation, would tell you the gun is harmless. Every test you perform confirms it, yet everyone else who tries it dies on the first attempt. Your reality would be irrevocably severed from the consensus. You would live in a personal universe where the laws of probability seem suspended just for you, crafting a reality so persistently survivable that it feels destined. This is the ultimate consequence of tying consciousness to a single branching thread, the creation of a private cosmos where miracles are not exceptions, but the unbroken rule of your continued existence. This eerie logic of a private, miraculous reality is not just confined to physics papers. It has quietly seeped into the stories we tell, gripping our collective imagination. You have likely already experienced a version of quantum immortality without ever hearing its name, in the movies you watch and the games you play. These narratives explore the haunting loneliness and bizarre consequences of branching paths and persistent consciousness, often capturing the emotional truth of the idea better than any equation could. Take the film The Prestige. Two rival magicians are locked in a deadly game of one-upmanship. The central trick, the transported man, does not rely on simple illusion. One magician uses a genuine, terrifying device based on the work of Nikola Tesla. Each night he performs the trick, the machine works, but it also creates a perfect duplicate of himself. One version appears across the theater in triumph, while the other version drowns in a water tank hidden beneath the stage. Every single performance ends with a death. From the perspective of the magician who takes the bow, he has survived. He steps off the stage carrying the memories of creating the trick, but he also knows in his bones that another him, an identical copy with the same memories up to that split second, died a horrible death moments ago. His consciousness follows the branch of survival, but at the terrible cost of knowing he must murder himself every night to maintain the illusion. It is a visceral, Gothic take on the identity paradox, asking if you would sacrifice endless copies of yourself for the appearance of a single, unbroken life. Other stories dive directly into the disorienting social fallout of branching worlds. The independent film Coherence presents a simple dinner party on a night when a comet passes overhead. Reality itself begins to subtly fracture. The characters slowly realize they are drifting between nearly identical versions of their own house and their own friends, each from a slightly different branching reality. The terror is not about monsters, but about the loss of a singular, shared truth. When they venture outside, they face the chilling possibility that they may never return to their original branch, or that the person who comes back is not the one who left. It dramatizes the social chaos implied by many worlds, where every decision splinters not just your path, but your entire community into separate, equally real strands. You are not just immortal in your branch, you are also perpetually losing everyone else to theirs. Television has tackled the idea with stark, technological precision. The miniseries Devs from Alex Garland revolves around a tech company that builds a deterministic quantum computer. This machine can supposedly see the past and future with perfect accuracy, revealing a universe where every action is predetermined, a single, unbreakable chain of cause and effect. This seems like the opposite of branching worlds until the crushing implications set in. If the future is fixed, then free will is an illusion, and characters are merely watching their fates unfold. The story becomes a meditation on whether knowing your single, immutable path is a form of prison, contrasting sharply with the chaotic freedom of infinite branches. It asks which is more terrifying, a universe with only one reality where you have no choices, or a multiverse where every choice is made, creating infinite copies of you, each believing they are the original. Perhaps the most direct and playful engagement with these ideas happens in video games, where the player's consciousness literally guides a character through repeated failures. The Stanley Parable is a masterpiece of this concept. You guide Stanley, an office worker, through a series of choices. If you disobey the narrator, you might walk into a broom closet. The narrator grows frustrated, the story breaks down, and Stanley often dies in absurd ways. Then the game resets. You, as the player, are back at Stanley's desk with the memory of your previous failure. Stanley, the character, is effectively immortal because you, the persistent consciousness controlling him, simply try again. The game explicitly plays with the notion of narrative branches, a persistent narrator who remembers your past attempts, and the eerie feeling that you are trapped in a loop you can never truly escape, no matter how many times you die within it. It turns the quantum suicide experiment into a dark comedy, where the player's undying attention is the engine of the character's perpetual resurrection. These stories rarely spell out the theory of quantum immortality. They do not have to. They tap into the deep, intuitive unease the idea produces, the fear of lost identity, the loneliness of a subjective reality, and the paradox of surviving what should be certain doom. They show that this is not just a physics puzzle, but a fundamental human curiosity about the nature of our own story. We are instinctively drawn to tales that ask, what if the world is not as solid as it seems? What if death is not an end, but a fork in a road we never see? Our fiction explores every shadowy corner of that question, proving that the thought experiment is at its heart, a very old story wearing the clothes of very new science. These stories leave us with a haunting personal question, one that moves from theory into the realm of lived experience. If you became convinced that quantum immortality was true, not as an abstract idea but as the actual rule governing your existence, how would it change you? Would the knowledge liberate you or imprison you in a new kind of fear? Imagine a person who has internalized this belief, who walks through the world certain that their conscious thread will always find a survival branch. On the surface, you might expect them to become utterly fearless, a reckless thrill seeker chasing ever greater dangers, secure in the belief that death is an illusion they will never witness. They might step into traffic, gamble with extreme sports, or play real-life versions of the quantum gun experiment, convinced the universe will always provide an escape route. But this assumed fearlessness quickly unravels under closer scrutiny. Death might be removed from the equation, but suffering is not. The thought experiment only guarantees that your consciousness continues. It says nothing about the quality of that continuation. You could survive a fall from a great height but end up paralyzed. You could walk away from a fire but with severe chronic pain. In a reality where death is not an end, injury becomes the ultimate threat, a state you might be forced to endure indefinitely. This could lead to a paradoxical outcome, a person who is more cautious, not less. They might avoid risks not out of fear of dying, but out of a profound dread of locking themselves into a branch of reality filled with unending agony, a timeline where they are permanently broken but forever aware. Their immortality becomes a curse, making them hyper-vigilant about preserving not just life, but a life worth living. This shifts the entire psychology of risk. For most of us, death is the ultimate negative outcome, the final stop. For a believer in this idea, the worst outcome is no longer an end, but a terrible, unending middle. The stakes feel even higher, not lower. Beyond the fear of injury lies a deeper, more existential weight, knowing that every choice spawns new versions of you, and that you are only aware of the branch where you persist, could create a crushing sense of isolation. You watch friends and family age and pass away in your timeline while your own story stretches on. You might begin to feel like a ghost among the living, a permanent tourist in other people's finite lives. This could foster a godlike detachment, a sense that the normal rules of consequence do not apply to you, breeding not joy but a profound loneliness. Alternatively, it might create a manic, obsessive search for meaning. If you are effectively immortal, what do you do with an endless tomorrow? The lack of a final deadline could render all short-term goals meaningless, or it could imbue every moment with unbearable significance, knowing you will have to live with the consequences of your actions for eons. Your belief would fundamentally reshape your relationship with time, consequence, and connection. It would force you to author a story with no final chapter, a daunting task for any mind. In the end, whether it leads to recklessness or paralyzing caution, the psychological impact points to a core human truth: our actions are shaped by the horizons we perceive. Remove the horizon of death and you do not find freedom, you find a vast and terrifying new landscape to navigate, one where the only compass you have is the fragile, persistent voice of your own conscious mind, wondering which version of forever it will inhabit next. But this persistent consciousness, forever navigating its survival branch, faces an even more profound and unsettling possibility. What if the entire journey, from your birth to every near miss and miraculous escape, is not a thread through a multiverse but a fleeting illusion? To explore this, we must venture into one of the strangest corners of cosmology, a thought experiment known as the Boltzmann brain. It proposes a cosmic horror that makes the multiverse seem almost comforting. Imagine the ultimate emptiness, a universe that has reached its final state, a vast, cold, and lifeless void where all stars have burned out and all structure has dissolved into a featureless sea of particles. In such a place, the laws of thermodynamics tell us that everything tends toward disorder. Yet, quantum mechanics allows for random fluctuations. Given enough time, an almost infinite amount of time, the random jostling of particles could, by sheer accident, spontaneously assemble a fully formed, self-aware human brain, complete with false memories of an entire life. This is a Boltzmann brain. It would pop into existence conscious and convinced it is you, with all your recollections of childhood, relationships, and the very video you are watching right now. It would believe it exists in a rich, structured universe, only to dissolve back into chaos a moment later. The terrifying question is this: how can you prove you are not one? This is not just a puzzle, it is a direct assault on the reliability of your most basic assumptions. If a random fluctuation can create a conscious experience indistinguishable from a lifetime, then any evidence you have for your own past or for the laws of physics themselves becomes suspect. You trust your memories, but a Boltzmann brain would have those same perfectly fabricated memories. You trust your observations of the cosmos, but that brain would hallucinate an entire consistent reality around it. The connection to quantum immortality is deep and disturbing. Both thought experiments challenge the foundation of personal identity and reality from opposite directions. Quantum immortality suggests your consciousness is forever bound to a branching path of survival, making you a permanent traveler in an ever-splitting cosmos. The Boltzmann brain suggests your consciousness might be a temporary, accidental glitch in a dead void, with no past and no future, merely a phantom feeling of existence. One gives you a kind of immortality at the cost of infinite copies. The other gives you a brief, fraudulent moment of awareness at the cost of everything being fake. They meet at the same dreadful crossroads, questioning whether any conscious being can truly trust the story it tells itself about where it came from and how long it will last. This pushes past physics into the realm of philosophy, into the problem of solipsism we touched on earlier, but with a cosmic scale. If the universe is old and vast enough, the math suggests Boltzmann brains should statistically outnumber ordinary, evolved brains like ours by an unimaginable factor. So, which is more likely, that you are the product of 14 billion years of intricate cosmic evolution, planet formation, and biological life, or that you are a random, momentary fluctuation in an eternal void? The sheer improbability of our ordered universe might suggest the latter, yet here we are, seemingly embedded in a consistent reality with rules and history. Scientists and philosophers grapple with this by looking for ways our universe might not allow such fluctuations, or by questioning our understanding of probability itself. The true horror of the Boltzmann brain is not that you are one, but that you can never be certain you are not. It injects a seed of radical doubt into the core of existence. It means that every moment of love, every triumph, every memory of a sunset could be a detailed fiction generated for a consciousness that has only existed for a fraction of a second. This casts quantum immortality in a new and even stranger light. Could your unbroken chain of survival be the elaborate, sustained hallucination of a Boltzmann brain that randomly formed with the memory of having just survived a car crash? Is the entire branching multiverse just the complex dream of a phantom mind in the dark? These questions have no clean answers. They are not meant to be solved, but to stretch our understanding of reality to its breaking point. They force us to confront the fragile nature of the one thing we think we know best, our own conscious experience. In the end, whether you are an immortal thread weaving through infinite worlds or a momentary spark of awareness in an endless night, the conclusion is eerily similar. You are alone with your story, and its truth is ultimately a mystery known only to you. This radical uncertainty forces us to examine the mechanism itself. The entire edifice of quantum immortality rests on one crucial and deeply ambiguous hinge: when exactly does consciousness split? This is not a minor technicality, it is a foundational crack in the theory's logic. If we accept the many worlds interpretation, then the universe branches with every possible quantum event. Every time an electron's path is uncertain, every time a photon could go left or right, reality forks. If your consciousness is tied to this branching, then you are not a single thread. You are a fire hose spraying copies of yourself into existence with every passing nanosecond. With each heartbeat, trillions of quantum events occur in your brain alone. If consciousness splits at each one, then the concept of a single, continuous you dissolves into noise. You are not immortal, you are a constantly exploding firework of momentary selves, each lasting only until the next quantum flicker creates two more. In this view, the idea of following a survival branch becomes absurd because there is no stable you to do the following. You are a blur, a statistical cloud of near-identical copies, all shouting that they are the original. The thought experiment collapses under its own weight, becoming a story about the endless multiplication of illusions, not the preservation of a self. So, to save the idea, perhaps the split is not so frequent. Maybe consciousness only branches at moments of true consequence, specifically at life or death junctures. This seems more intuitive. It aligns with the dramatic stories of near misses and quantum suicide. But this refinement introduces an even thornier problem. What defines a significant event? Where do we draw the line? Is it only the instant a bullet would strike your brain? What about the moment you decide to get in the car that later crashes? That decision involved countless neural processes, each with quantum underpinnings. Does your consciousness split then, creating a version of you that stayed home? What about a diagnosis of a terminal illness? Is that a branching point, or is the split only at the final biological failure? The definition becomes maddeningly slippery. Is significance defined by the objective probability of death, or by your subjective awareness of risk? A seasoned rock climber on a difficult face might be in mortal danger but feel focused and calm. A person with a severe phobia might have a panic attack on a safe balcony, feeling they are facing death. Which scenario triggers the branching? If it is subjective, then your consciousness could be splitting based on your fears and misconceptions, not on any objective physical threat. This makes the mechanism seem arbitrary, even narcissistic, as if the cosmos is carefully filtering realities based on your personal anxiety. This ambiguity is the theory's core weakness. Without a clear, testable rule for when consciousness divides, quantum immortality remains a haunting philosophical ghost, not a serious scientific model. It is a narrative that resonates with our deepest fears and hopes about death, identity, and luck, but it floats in a sea of unanswerable questions. The power of the thought experiment is not in providing answers, but in exposing how poorly we understand the relationship between the buzzing quantum world, the physical continuity of our bodies, and the intimate, singular feeling of being ourselves. It leaves us staring into a mirror, wondering if the face looking back is a permanent resident of reality, or just the most recent frame in an infinite, flickering film. This mirror of endless possibilities reflects a question far more personal than physics. If you accept that countless versions of you perish in branching realities, what does that mean for your conscience here and now? The thought experiment shifts from a puzzle of survival to one of profound moral solitude. In the branch where you walk away from that car crash, your family embraces you with tearful relief. But in the branch right next to it, the one you never experienced, they are planning your funeral. From their perspective in that reality, you are gone. You have left them to grieve, to navigate a world shattered by your absence. And according to this view, you do this not once, but every single time your life is threatened. Each miraculous escape in your timeline is paired with a tragedy in another. This creates a haunting sense of responsibility, a form of multiversal guilt. Have you, in your relentless survival, abandoned infinite versions of your loved ones to infinite sorrow? Is your continued existence a silent betrayal played out across the cosmos? The weight of that idea can feel immense. It suggests that to be the you that survives is to be, in a sense, a perpetual absconder, always leaving a mess of heartbreak behind in realities you can never return to or even acknowledge. This is the ultimate distortion of survivor's guilt, magnified across countless worlds. It introduces a chilling ethical asymmetry. You get to live on, blessed with the continuity of your story, while other versions of people you care about must endure your loss. They have no such escape. Their pain is as real and final in their branch as your relief is in yours. This could foster a bizarre and burdensome sense of duty. If you believe your actions in this branch might influence the odds of survival in others, you might become paralyzed with hypervigilance. Choosing to drive a certain route, taking a risky job, even dietary choices could be seen as casting a vote that might doom another version of yourself. Your life becomes a labyrinth of imagined consequences, where every decision feels like it has a shadow in a world of mourning. Conversely, this knowledge could lead to a dangerous moral detachment. If every tragedy is balanced by a survival somewhere, then perhaps no single outcome carries ultimate weight. You might start to view suffering as statistically inevitable, a necessary counterpoint in the grand balance sheet of the multiverse. This is a slippery slope toward a kind of cosmic indifference, where compassion is diluted by the sheer scale of infinite outcomes. Why grieve a loss in this world when in another world it did not happen? Why strive to prevent a disaster here when it is already a fact in a neighboring reality? This logic unravels the very foundation of our moral urgency, which is built on the finiteness and uniqueness of events. Our ethics rely on the idea that what we do matters because there is only one timeline where we can do it. If every possible action is taken somewhere, then moral responsibility splinters into meaningless fragments. Yet, perhaps the most profound dilemma is one of connection. Our deepest relationships are built on shared, singular history. You and a loved one build a story together, a tapestry of moments that belongs only to the two of you. But if both of you are constantly branching, then the you and the them in this branch are only temporarily aligned. The person you share breakfast with today is not the exact same person who will grieve for you in a branch where you die tomorrow. They are a copy who diverged at some prior point. This realization injects a subtle poison into intimacy. Are we ever truly loving a single person, or just the current iteration of a pattern that is constantly replicating and diverging? It casts the bonds we hold most dear as fleeting convergences in an endless storm of splitting realities. To believe in quantum immortality is to accept a form of radical loneliness where you are the only constant in your narrative, and everyone else is a temporary fellow traveler on a path that will inevitably fork away from yours. Your obligation, then, may not be to the infinite ghosts of yourself or others, but to the quality of the convergence you are in right now. It makes this branch, this specific set of relationships and experiences, not less meaningful but uniquely precious because it is the only one you will ever know. The ethical imperative shifts from worrying about abandoned copies to honoring the singular, subjective reality you are actually living. In the end, the thought experiment leaves us on a razor's edge between infinite responsibility and absolute solitude, challenging us to find a moral compass in a universe that may have no true north. This solitude and moral ambiguity might find an unexpected echo in the most personal of human mysteries, the near-death experience. For those who have stood at that threshold, the stories are strikingly similar: a tunnel of light, a feeling of profound peace, a life review flashing before their eyes, and then a powerful pull back into the body. Spiritual traditions see this as evidence of an afterlife, a soul glimpsing the world beyond before returning to its earthly vessel. But through the lens of quantum immortality, a starkly different, purely physical narrative emerges. What if these vivid sensations are not glimpses of heaven, but the raw data of consciousness itself, scrambling to relocate as the body fails? Imagine your biological system entering a terminal state, a severe trauma from which recovery seems impossible. In the branching multiverse, this creates a critical juncture. Countless branches lead to death, but a vanishing few, through some improbable confluence of cellular repair or external intervention, lead to survival. The theory suggests your conscious point of view must follow a survival branch. The transition between the branch where your body is failing and the branch where it, against all odds, recovers might not be seamless. That jarring, surreal moment of crossing over could be what we experience as a near-death event. The tunnel of light might be a neurological interpretation of shifting into a new probability stream. The life review could be the mind's frantic, final access to the memory database of the version of you that is ending, integrating those memories into the consciousness that continues. The overwhelming feeling of peace, perhaps it is the relief of a system successfully finding a stable thread of continuity, escaping the terminal signal. This is not a spiritual homecoming, but a desperate and miraculous reboot. Consider the common report of floating above one's own body, observing the resuscitation efforts. A spiritual interpretation sees this as the soul detaching. The quantum branching view might frame it as the consciousness momentarily unmoored from its specific physical coordinates, in the chaotic instant before it anchors into the nearby branch where those medical efforts against the initial odds actually succeed. In that new branch, the doctors would remark on a miraculous recovery, a patient who came back from the brink. From the inside, you would remember the out-of-body view and the light, not as a visit to the afterlife, but as the turbulent passage between two nearly identical realities, one where you died on the table and this one where you're listening to this now. This reframes the near-death experience from a supernatural event into a potentially natural, if utterly bizarre, process of subjective continuity. It offers a physical, if highly speculative, explanation for why these experiences feel so real and transformative. They are real. They are the first-hand report of consciousness navigating a quantum survival event. The profound sense of meaning and connection often reported afterward could stem from the brain's attempt to rationalize an impossible continuity, weaving a narrative of divine love to explain why it is still here. This does not diminish the experience, it simply shifts its origin from the metaphysical to the mechanical workings of a multiverse we do not yet understand. The light is not at the end of a tunnel, but the glare of a doorway between worlds, and you are the only one who walks through it. That doorway between worlds might not lead to another physical reality at all, but to a server room. The unsettling logic of quantum immortality finds a strange and potent echo in another modern mind virus, the simulation hypothesis. This is the idea, popularized by figures like Elon Musk and philosophers like Nick Bostrom, that our entire universe is not base reality, but an artificial construct, a hyper-advanced computer simulation created by a future civilization. If that is true, then the rules of our existence are not laws of physics, but lines of code. And in that context, the phenomenon of always surviving against the odds takes on a chillingly literal meaning. Death in a simulation is not an end, it is a glitch, a character reset, or simply a change of player perspective. Quantum immortality could be a baked-in feature of the system, a fail-safe ensuring the user or the core consciousness experiencing the simulation never encounters a hard termination. Imagine you are playing an open-world video game. Your character is exploring a treacherous mountain pass. You misjudge a jump and tumble toward a fatal fall. But just before you hit the ground, the game autosaves to a point a few seconds before your mistake. From your perspective as the player, you never saw the death screen. You simply found yourself back on the ledge with the memory of the fall but not the consequence. The game's code ensured your continuous experience. Now scale that up to a universe-sized simulation where you are not a player with a controller, but the consciousness inhabiting an avatar. Every near miss, every improbable survival could be the simulation's equivalent of an autosave, seamlessly transferring your point of view to a nearby instance where the fatal event did not occur. The branching many worlds are not parallel universes, but backup servers or forked simulation threads. Your consciousness is not following a quantum path, it is being rerouted by the central processing unit to maintain user continuity. The eerie feeling of defying statistics is not a law of physics, but a design choice by the programmers. They may have built the simulation with a core rule: the primary consciousness must not experience discontinuity. So when your avatar's car swerves toward a tree, the system does not render the crash. It instantly loads the scenario where the car swerved just enough, or where the brakes worked a fraction better. You experience the close call and the relief. The version of you that hit the tree, that instance was simply closed, its data archived or deleted. This reframes all the paradoxes we have discussed. The problem of when consciousness splits is solved. It splits exactly when the simulation's disaster avoidance algorithms determine a fatal outcome is imminent. The Boltzmann brain is no longer a random fluctuation in a dead cosmos, but a temporary rendering glitch, a corrupted file that briefly achieves self-awareness before being corrected by the system's error-handling protocols. Even the profound loneliness of outliving everyone could be a feature. Perhaps you are a single user on a very long, very personal quest, and the other characters are just sophisticated non-player characters or other user avatars on their own branching path. Your loved ones age and pass away in your instance because their narrative arc is complete, while yours is programmed to continue. The simulation hypothesis offers a clean, if dystopian, answer to why the universe seems so improbably fine-tuned for life and why our consciousness feels so persistent. We are not in a fine-tuned universe, we are in a tailored one. The constants of physics are not mysterious, they are the initial parameters set by the programmers. And our inability to experience death is not a quantum miracle. It is the ultimate user experience design, preventing the equivalent of a blue screen of reality. This connection makes the thought experiment even more vertigo-inducing. Before, you were a potentially immortal entity navigating a chaotic multiverse. Now you might be a piece of software in a box, kept running because someone or something finds your continuous story valuable, or perhaps is simply unwilling to hit the stop button. Whether you are quantum energy or simulated data, the conclusion for you is identical. You keep going, forever wondering at the unbroken thread of your own existence, in a reality that seems increasingly like a story written by rules you can never fully see. So the simulation hypothesis offers one possible architecture for this endless survival, but a true scientist or a truly curious mind would ask a more direct question. Could we ever actually test quantum immortality? The short and perhaps disappointing answer is likely no, at least not in any rigorous, repeatable way that would satisfy a physics journal. The core problem is that the entire phenomenon is defined as subjective. It is a rule that applies only to the first-person point of view. Any outside observer is, by definition, not part of the protected consciousness and would see normal statistics play out. This creates an impossible barrier to conventional experimentation. Imagine designing a test. You would need a volunteer who truly, deeply believes in the premise, willing to subject themselves to a repeated, life-threatening event governed by pure quantum randomness. Even if such a person existed, the moment you, as an outside scientist, observe the results, you step outside the subjective frame. You would see the volunteer eventually die, confirming normal probability. But from the volunteer's subjective point of view, in the branch where they survived, you would be the scientist who witnessed their miraculous endurance. The two perspectives could never be reconciled within a single, shared laboratory. This is why the thought experiment relies on devices like the quantum suicide gun, a test that is fundamentally untestable because it requires the observer and the subject to be the same person, and for that person to be willing to not exist in the vast majority of resulting realities. We can, however, propose a slightly less horrific, though still deeply unethical, real-world analog. Instead of a lethal gun, use a quantum random number generator linked to a device that delivers a non-lethal but significant and memorable consequence. Think of a mechanism that administers a powerful but harmless electric shock, or one that instantly and permanently shaves the subject's head. The setup is the same. Each minute, a truly random quantum event decides the outcome. If the number is 1, the consequence triggers. If it is 0, nothing happens. The odds are set to 50-50. A willing subject, isolated in a room, agrees to undergo one trial per day for a year. From the outside, we would expect the subject to be shocked or shaved roughly half the time. The statistics would be clear, but if quantum immortality holds, the subject's conscious experience would only include the days where the result was 0. They would complete the year-long experiment having never once experienced the negative consequence. To them, the machine would appear broken, or they would believe they possess incredible luck. They would have personal, empirical evidence that defies the objective data you collected. Yet, even this milder test is fraught. The negative consequence, while not lethal, is still a form of harm, making it ethically unacceptable. More fundamentally, it does not prove the theory. It only produces an anecdote of astounding luck, which could be explained by a faulty random number generator, unconscious bias in the setup, or just that one in several billion statistical outlier. The subject's personal truth would be compelling to them, but scientifically inconclusive. This leads us to a more philosophical form of evidence, the persistent feeling of being lucky that some people report throughout their lives. You might know someone or be someone who seems to constantly dodge misfortune. They miss flights that later crash. They change careers just before an industry collapses. They find themselves in the right place at the right time with uncanny consistency. From within their own narrative, it can feel like more than coincidence. It feels like a pattern, a gentle nudge from the universe always steering them away from the cliff's edge. Could this subjective sense of charmed existence be weak, anecdotal evidence for a quantum immortality effect? It is a tantalizing thought. The person is not experiencing dramatic near-death escapes every day. but a slow, steady accumulation of favorable outcomes in life's smaller quantum lotteries. Their consciousness, according to the idea, is simply riding the branch where the dice roll in their favor more often than not. Their feeling of luck is the emotional residue of their particular path through the multiverse. Yet, we must be extraordinarily cautious here. Human brains are pattern recognition engines wired for survival. We are famously poor at intuitively understanding probability. We remember the times we won a random draw and forget the hundreds of times we did not. We notice the single missed flight that crashed, but not the 20 times we missed a flight that landed safely. This is called selection bias. The feeling of being lucky is often a story we construct in hindsight, weaving together the fortunate hits and ignoring the mundane misses. It is a powerful narrative, but a terribly weak form of evidence for a physical theory. For every person who feels miraculously lucky, there is another who feels tragically cursed, their consciousness seemingly stuck on a branch of perpetual misfortune. The theory would have to account for both, suggesting the multiverse contains every possible gradient of luck, and we are each having a different qualitative experience of the same underlying mechanism. Therefore, despite its gripping implications and its eerie resonance with certain personal experiences, quantum immortality remains firmly in the realm of philosophy and speculative thought. It is not a scientific theory with predictive power, but a logical exploration of the consequences of other theories, primarily the many worlds interpretation. Its value lies not in providing answers we can test, but in asking questions that shake our assumptions. It forces us to confront the nature of our own subjective reality, the illusion of identity, and the terrifying possibility that the story we call our life is both infinitely precious and statistically inevitable. It is a mirror held up to our deepest fears about death and our deepest hopes for continuity. We may never run the experiment, but the thought experiment itself has already been run in our minds every time we ponder a close call or marvel at a string of good fortune. It lives in the quiet space between heartbeats, asking if the next one is guaranteed, or if we are just the version of ourselves for whom, so far, it always has been. Our own improbable survival, mirrored across the cosmos, forces a collision between two great mysteries. The unsettling logic of quantum immortality may cast a new shadow over humanity's oldest cosmic question, the Fermi paradox. Enrico Fermi, a physicist, famously looked at the vast, ancient universe and asked a simple, devastating question: where is everybody? With billions of stars older than our sun, the galaxy should be teeming with intelligent life, their civilizations so advanced we could not possibly miss them. Yet the sky is silent. Our searches hear nothing but empty static. The proposed solutions range from the dark, like a great filter that wipes out civilizations before they can expand, to the hopeful, like the zoo hypothesis, where they watch us but do not interfere. But what if the answer is not about their absence, but about the specific nature of their presence? What if quantum immortality is not just a human curiosity, but a universal phase of development? Imagine a civilization reaching a technological adolescence comparable to our own. They unlock the power of their atom, they engineer their own biology, they create artificial intelligence. Each of these advancements is a potential branching point on a species-wide scale. In countless parallel realities, that civilization makes a fatal mistake. A nuclear war eradicates them, a genetically engineered plague escapes the lab, an artificial intelligence turns against its creators. These are the cosmic versions of the car crash, the failed jump, the quantum gun. In those branches, the great filter has done its work and the galaxy remains silent. But according to the thought experiment, consciousness follows the survival branch. So, somewhere, there must be a version of that civilization that, against all cosmic odds, navigates each existential crisis. They survive the war, contain the plague, align with the artificial intelligence. Their consciousness, their collective cultural continuity, persists. But here is the twist: the very act of surviving these filters might change them in ways that make them invisible to us. To endure, they may have had to become undetectable. Perhaps the only way to safely manage universe-altering technology is to retreat from the physical realm entirely, uploading their consciousness into a protected digital substrate, a cosmic server farm hidden within the fabric of space itself. Or maybe they transcend into forms of energy or information we cannot yet perceive, living in the quantum foam between stars. They are not extinct, they are right here, all around us, but we lack the senses to see them. They have become the cosmic equivalent of the scientist who only ever hears the click, forever existing in the branch where they became silent, hidden, and eternal. From their point of view, they are the inevitable survivors of the Galactic Darwin Awards. From our point of view, peering out with radio telescopes, the universe seems barren. They are hiding in plain sight, not out of fear or policy, but as a necessary consequence of their unbroken survival through an infinite minefield of potential extinction events. The silence is not a sign of failure, but the hallmark of a species that has graduated to a state of quantum immortality, forever sequestered in the narrow, precious branches of reality where they continue to exist. We are listening for a shout, but everyone who made it has learned to whisper. Yet this haunting vision of a universe perpetually dividing rests on a single, contested assumption. The many worlds interpretation is not the only way to make sense of the quantum strangeness, and its rivals offer a starkly different picture of reality, one where the branches never truly form. To understand why you might not be immortal after all, we must explore the processes that might keep the universe whole. This brings us to two crucial ideas: quantum Darwinism and decoherence. They work together to explain why we all seem to share one objective world, and why your consciousness likely cannot hop between realities. Quantum Darwinism begins with a simple observation. When you look at a chair, you see a chair. You do not see a blurry superposition of a chair and a table, or a chair in two places at once. Your perception is definite. Why? Because the chair is not isolated. It is constantly interacting with its environment, with air molecules, dust particles, and photons of light. These countless tiny interactions act like a continuous vote. They select or copy specific stable properties of the chair, like its location and shape, and broadcast that information out into the world. This process is relentless and democratic. Just as natural selection favors traits that aid survival, this environmental interaction favors quantum states that are robust and can be widely copied. The fragile superpositions, the ghostly states of being both here and there, are quickly drowned out. They cannot survive the constant scrutiny of the environment. So, what you perceive as the single, solid chair is simply the quantum state that won the Darwinian competition, the one that got copied trillions of times into the surrounding world. There is no splitting into separate branches for every possibility. Instead, there is a winnowing down to a single consensus reality that all observers can agree upon because they are all reading from the same environmental transcript. This directly challenges the foundation of quantum immortality. If the environment is constantly forcing a single outcome, then there is no other branch for your consciousness to jump to when death looms. The gun either fires or it does not, and that result is etched irreversibly into the world through a trillion tiny interactions before you could ever perceive an alternative. Your consciousness is not selecting a path, it is witnessing the only path that survived the environmental vote. This leads us to the mechanism that enforces this single reality, decoherence. Think of it as the ultimate noise that destroys quantum magic. Imagine you're trying to have a delicate, private conversation in the middle of a roaring, crowded stadium. Your words are instantly lost in the chaos. Decoherence is like that for quantum particles. To maintain a superposition, a particle must be perfectly isolated, free from any interaction that could reveal its state. But in the real world, perfect isolation is impossible. A particle is constantly jostled by other particles, by light, by the faintest gravitational pull. Each of these interactions is like a tiny measurement, a peak that forces the particle to pick a state. For something as small as an electron, it can stay in a superposition for a fleeting moment. But for something as large and complex as a human being, made of trillions upon trillions of interacting particles, decoherence is instantaneous. Your body is the crowded stadium. The fragile quantum superpositions that might allow for branching are destroyed faster than any thought could form. This is the critical argument against the feasibility of quantum immortality. For your consciousness to split and follow a survival branch, the quantum state of your entire brain, a macroscopic object, would need to remain in a coherent superposition long enough for the universe to fork. Decoherence theory says this simply cannot happen. The environment interacts with your brain far too quickly for any sustained branching to occur. At the moment of a life-threatening event, the quantum possibilities collapse into one definite outcome almost immediately, cemented by decoherence. There is no nearby reality where you survived, because that possibility was erased by the relentless noise of the world before it could ever become real. From this perspective, the eerie clicks of the quantum suicide gun are not evidence of branching, but the result of a single, linear sequence of random events. You hear a click because in this one and only reality, the atom did not decay at that moment. In the trials where it did decay, you died and your story ended absolutely. Your consciousness is not a thread weaving through possibilities. It is a flame that burns in one place and when the wind blows the wrong way is snuffed out forever. These theories do not make the universe less strange, but they anchor our strangeness in a shared, objective world. They suggest that the solidity of the floor beneath your feet and the finality of a life's end are not illusions, but the hard-won consensus of a universe that cannot keep a secret. This solid, single reality offers a finality that might be more comforting than we admit. The terror of immortality is not just a philosophical exercise, it is an ancient human dread woven into our oldest stories. Think of the mythological figure Tithonus. He was granted eternal life by the gods, but he forgot to ask for eternal youth. His body withered and shriveled over centuries, becoming a prisoner of his own endless existence, begging for a death that would never come. Or consider the legend of the wandering Jew, cursed to walk the earth until the second coming, a perpetual witness to the rise and fall of civilizations, forever an outsider to the human cycle of life and death. These are not tales of triumph, they are nightmares. They reveal our deep intuition that an unending story might be the greatest punishment imaginable. Quantum immortality, if true, could be a scientific version of this same curse. It promises not a vibrant, youthful forever, but simply the unbroken continuation of your conscious point of view. And that thread could weave through realities of unimaginable horror. You would not just survive a car crash, your consciousness might follow a branch where you survive a devastating, decades-long global pandemic that collapses society. You would live through the slow decay of a nuclear winter or a future where climate change renders the planet a barely habitable desert. In these branches, you are not a hero. You are just a survivor enduring an epoch of suffering because your consciousness cannot find an exit. The thought experiment guarantees you avoid fatal outcomes, but it says nothing about quality of life. You could find yourself in a timeline of chronic, unbearable pain, with medical science just advanced enough to keep you perpetually aware but never well. This is the true existential horror, the possibility that your immortal thread is not one of glory, but of relentless, grinding endurance. Would such an existence lead to ultimate wisdom? After witnessing 1,000 years of human folly, perhaps you would gain a godlike perspective, but more likely you would face infinite boredom. Every story, no matter how grand, becomes tedious if it has no final chapter. Every human relationship becomes a fleeting encounter with a being whose lifespan is a blink to your own. You would watch cultures, languages, and entire species rise and vanish, leaving you alone with memories no one else shares. This isolation could easily spiral into a unique form of madness, a consciousness so detached from the transient world that it loses all connection to meaning itself. Your drive to achieve, to love, to build, all of it is fueled by the knowledge that your time is limited. Remove that limit and motivation crumbles. Why create art if you have an eternity to do it tomorrow? Why forge deep bonds if you will inevitably watch them turn to dust? Your immortality could become a vast, empty room where every possible experience eventually echoes into silence, leaving you with the terrifying question, what do you do when there is always a tomorrow, and every tomorrow is just like the yesterday you have already lived 1,000,000 times before? The blessing of endless life quickly reveals itself as a curse of endless repetition, where the only new frontier is the depth of your own solitude. This continuous replacement of the self forces a stark question about memory and identity. You vividly remember your 5th birthday, the taste of the cake, the feeling of the party hat on your head. You remember the car crash you narrowly avoided last year. But are those memories truly yours, or are they just data inherited from a previous version of you that no longer exists? This is where the ancient philosophical puzzle of the ship of Theseus collides with the branching multiverse. The original thought experiment asks if a ship whose planks are slowly replaced one by one over many years remains the same ship. If you have all the old planks and rebuild the ship with them, which one is the true ship of Theseus? Now apply that to your own consciousness, not over years but across quantum branches. With every survival event, with every decision that forks reality, a plank of your identity is replaced. The version of you that existed before the split is gone. The version that continues has all the memories, all the personality traits, but is it the same entity or just a perfect replica built from the same mental materials? The branching multiverse suggests it is a replica. The you that survived the crash in 2024 is built from the psychological planks of the you whose childhood branched in 1995. But are you the same ship? From the inside, it feels like it. You have an unbroken chain of memories linking you to that child. Yet, according to the physics we are exploring, that chain is an illusion of continuity. The child in 1995 was the starting point of a tree, and you are just one branch among millions holding a copy of the original blueprint. Your identity is not a single, persistent thing. It is a pattern that gets photocopied at every junction, with each copy believing it is the original document. This shatters the comforting idea of a stable, enduring self. You are not a stone rolling down a hill, gathering moss. You are a river constantly forking into new streams, each carrying the same water from the source but flowing in different directions. The water in your stream now is not the same water that started at the spring, but it is part of the same continuous flow. So, which matters more for identity, the material, the specific atoms and quantum states, or the pattern, the information and the feeling of continuity? If it is the pattern, then you are the same as your branched siblings in other realities, at least until the moment of divergence. If it is the material, then you are a completely new entity every time the universe splits, a stranger wearing the face and memories of a past self. This gets even more dizzying when we introduce a hypothetical time travel twist. Imagine you could send a message back to your childhood self in 1995. You write a letter saying, "Be careful on the road in 2024. That child grows up, heeds the warning, and avoids the crash entirely. From his perspective, he received a message from his future self and changed his path. But from the perspective of the you who wrote the letter, the you who survived the crash, what happened? Your childhood self branched onto a new, safer timeline. The you who wrote the letter remains in the original branch, the one where the crash happened and you narrowly survived. You are not the same person who will grow up from that worn child. You are a related but separate branch, a version of the pattern that experienced the danger and lived to tell the tale. Your act of time travel did not save you, it created a new you. This highlights the profound solitude of the thought experiment. Even if you could reach across time, you are not saving your own continuous identity, you are authoring a new one. Your stream of consciousness is locked to its own branch, a unique thread in the tapestry that can observe other threads but never jump to them. The self is not a traveler but a path, and each of us is forever walking the one we are on, haunted by the echoes of the paths we almost took. Memory is the anchor that holds our identity in place. It tells us who we are by charting where we have been. But in a branching multiverse, this anchor might be drifting on a very strange sea. Consider the moment you narrowly avoid disaster. Your memory records the close call, the swerve, the pounding heart, and the relief. It does not contain the memory of the impact because in your branch, that impact never happened for you. Your memory is perfectly consistent with the timeline you experienced. It is a flawless record of your single, subjective path through the chaos of possibilities. This clean continuity is what makes the illusion of a single self so convincing. You are not haunted by the ghosts of your own deaths in other branches because those events left no imprint on the mind that survived. Your story feels linear and whole because your memory only stores the data from the thread you actually lived. But what about those moments when memory itself seems to glitch? The unsettling feeling of déjà vu, that powerful sensation that you have lived this exact moment before, or the collective memory anomalies we call Mandela effects, where large groups of people vividly recall a detail that never happened, like a children's book character named Berenstain, bears being spelled with an E as in Berenstein. In a single, solid universe, these are written off as quirks of the brain, misfires of neural processing, or the unreliability of human recollection. Yet, through the lens of branching realities, they invite a more haunting speculation. Could these be faint, distorted echoes from nearly identical branches, a whisper of memory from a version of you in a neighboring reality where things were just slightly different? Imagine two branches of reality that are almost perfect mirrors of each other, diverging on something trivial. In one branch, a logo is blue, in the other, it is red. The branches are so similar that the quantum vibrations of the two worlds almost hum in unison. Now, picture your consciousness riding the branch where the logo is blue. What if, for a fleeting instant, the barrier between these nearly identical worlds grew thin? Not enough to swap places, but just enough for a ghost of a signal to cross over. Your brain, wired to find patterns, might receive a faint, nonsensical pulse of information from the other branch, a memory of seeing a red logo. The result would be a profound sense of wrongness, a conviction that something is not as it should be, accompanied by a shadow of a memory you cannot place. That is déjà vu. It is not that you have lived this before in your past, but that a nearly identical version of you is living it right now, in a world so close you can almost feel its breath. The Mandela effect takes this idea to a collective level. It is not one person misremembering, but hundreds or thousands sharing the same specific false memory. If we are all navigating our own branching paths, perhaps we occasionally drift close to a major branch point where a cultural detail split. Maybe in a vast cluster of nearby branches, the book really was spelled Berenstein. A critical mass of people whose consciousness currently resides in the Berenstain branches might, through some rare resonance, tap into the collective memory field of that other cluster. They would share a coherent but factually incorrect memory because it is factually correct in a reality that is almost theirs. It would feel like a shared dream, a consensus glitch in the matrix, precisely because it points to a consensus that genuinely exists in another part of the multiverse. These would not be memories of our own past, but bleed through from the present of our near-identical neighbors. The implications of this are deeply strange. It would mean our most private internal experience, our memory, is not a sealed vault. It could be permeable, vulnerable to subtle interference from the lives we almost lived. Our sense of reality would be built not just on what is, but on faint static from what almost was. It blurs the line between imagination and perception. Is that sudden, unexplained recollection of a room you have never seen a creative fabrication, or a brief window into a home you inhabit in another world? This speculation transforms memory from a simple recording into a potential receiver, occasionally tuning into stations from universes that are almost but not quite our own. It suggests that the branching multiverse might not be perfectly insulated. The walls between worlds could have tiny cracks, and through them, we sometimes hear the echoes of our other selves, living their slightly different lives, reminding us that the path we are on is only one of an infinite number, and that our story is both uniquely ours and eternally shared. These faint echoes from other branches hint at a cosmos teeming with possibilities, but they also raise a chilling final question. If your consciousness is forever tied to a path of survival, could that path ever truly end? Is there a final door, a state of existence so absolute that not a single branch leads away from it? Even the most persistent thread must at some point run out of fabric. The most discussed candidate for this ultimate end is not a bang, but a whimper, the heat death of the universe. Picture a future so distant it defies comprehension. All stars have burned out, all black holes have evaporated through Hawking radiation. The cosmos is a vast, dark, and nearly perfect vacuum, a thin soup of particles so spread out that temperatures hover at an unthinkable fraction of a degree above absolute zero. In this state, the universe has reached maximum entropy. There is no energy gradient, no hot place to flow to a cold place. It is a state of perfect, lifeless equilibrium. No work can be done, no structure can form, no thought can flicker. This is a cosmos where the very concept of probability has faded. For a branch of reality to exist where you survive, there must be some physical possibility, however remote, for a configuration of particles that constitutes a living, thinking you. In the heat death, that possibility drops to zero. The quantum dice stop rolling because every throw yields the same frozen result. Your consciousness, having navigated a billion near misses and miraculous technological reprieves, would find itself in the last habitable pocket in the last galaxy, watching as the stars outside wink out one by one. You would be the sole sentient being, perhaps kept alive by machinery of your own devising, until even that machinery could no longer find the energy to run. And then, in that final branch, your awareness would simply cease, not because it jumped to another reality, but because there were no other realities left to jump to. Every path converges on the same silent, eternal freeze. Your subjective immortality would have lasted for eons, but it would meet its absolute limit in the cold, dark quiet of a universe that has forgotten how to change. There is another, more violent potential end, one that could arrive at any moment without warning. Physicists call it vacuum decay. It proposes that our universe is not in its true, most stable state. We might exist in a false vacuum, a precarious valley of energy, like a ball resting on a hillside instead of at the very bottom. A random quantum fluctuation somewhere in the cosmos could act as a trigger, creating a tiny bubble of the true, stable vacuum. This bubble would expand at the speed of light, rewriting the fundamental laws of physics as it goes. The constants that allow atoms to bind, that allow chemistry and life, would be erased. Inside this expanding wall of new reality, existence as we know it would be impossible. This event would be the ultimate eraser. It would not just destroy planets or galaxies, it would annihilate the very rules that make branches possible. If such a bubble formed, it would sweep through the entire multiverse of branches originating from our cosmic domain. There would be no surviving branch because the substrate of reality itself would be transformed into something utterly alien and lifeless. Your consciousness, no matter which branch it rode, would be unmade at the moment the bubble reached it. This is not a death you could cheat. It is a reset button for existence, and it leaves no room for a quantum escape clause. Both of these endpoints, the slow freeze and the sudden rewrite, lead to the same bleak but logical conclusion. Subjective immortality in this framework is not a promise of infinity. It is a guarantee of an extremely long and perhaps increasingly lonely journey with a final destination. You are not a permanent resident of the multiverse, you are its longest-lasting tourist. Your ticket ensures you see every possible sight, survive every possible danger, and outlast every other traveler, but even your ticket has an expiration date stamped by the ultimate fate of reality itself. This finality, strangely, might be the only thing that gives your endless journey meaning. Without an end, can a story truly be said to have a shape? Your immortality, however long, becomes the narrative of how one conscious thread experienced the entire lifespan of a cosmos, from its vibrant middle to its inevitable conclusion. You are not escaping the cycle, you are riding it all the way down until there is nowhere left to go, and no version of you left to wonder what comes next. The silence of a dead universe is not the only void you might face. A deeper emptiness waits within the logic itself, a philosophical isolation more profound than any physical solitude. If your consciousness is the one constant, forever finding the branch where it persists, then what is the rest of the world? A convincing illusion, a magnificent but hollow stage set designed with perfect consistency to make you believe you are not alone. This is the solipsistic abyss at the heart of quantum immortality, the idea that only your own mind is truly, undeniably real. Everyone you meet, every relationship you cherish, every historical event you learn about could be nothing more than an elaborate and consistent backdrop for your singular, unending performance. Your loved ones laugh and cry, they have their own rich inner lives from your perspective, but they are ultimately phantoms in your personal cosmos, destined to fade away while you continue. This is perhaps the most chilling implication of all, not that you will live forever, but that you might live forever completely and utterly alone. Does this realization drain life of all meaning? If the universe is just a solipsistic play for an audience of one, then are achievements, love, and legacy just elaborate forms of self-deception? It is a terrifying thought that your entire existence could be a beautifully crafted dream from which you never wake. Yet there is another way to see this same stark landscape, one that aligns with a powerful school of human thought, existentialism. Existentialist philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre argued that life has no inherent pre-given meaning. We are not born with a purpose inscribed by a god or by nature. We are thrown into existence, and it is our terrifying and magnificent responsibility to create meaning through our choices and actions. The universe is indifferent, and that very indifference is what grants us our radical freedom. Quantum immortality, in its most extreme form, presents a similar universe, but with the dial turned to its maximum setting. The cosmos is not just indifferent, it is literally structured around the continuity of your subjective viewpoint. This does not necessarily make it meaningless, it makes you the sole author of meaning. The burden and the beauty of your existence become one and the same. If you are the only conscious anchor in a swirling multiverse, then every act of kindness, every pursuit of knowledge, every moment of creation is not a message sent into an indifferent void. It is a decree you make about the kind of reality you choose to inhabit. You are not discovering meaning, you are imposing it with every decision on the world that unfolds around you. The love you feel for another person is no less real or valuable because they might be a profound aspect of your own conscious experience. In fact, it could be seen as the ultimate act of creativity, to populate your eternal journey with beings so vivid and complex that you can love them, learn from them, and grieve them. This is not a retreat into narcissism, but an embrace of ultimate subjective responsibility. You are the artist and the art, the dreamer and the dream. The weight of that can feel immense, a form of cosmic loneliness, but it also contains a strange kind of liberation. all the external pressures, the expectations of society, the fear of how you will be remembered, they soften. In the end, your narrative is not being judged by an external audience because you are the only permanent audience member. The value of your story is determined entirely by the depth, courage, and compassion you bring to it. A life lived with authenticity and connection becomes its own reward, not because it earns you a place in history, but because it enriches the only reality you will ever know. This shifts the question from, is this all for nothing, to what do I want my everything to be? The burden is that you must build your own cathedral of meaning, brick by brick, in a universe that offers no blueprint. The beauty is that you get to decide with every breath what that cathedral looks like and who is welcome inside. This profound responsibility, however, rests on a foundation that many scientists and philosophers find deeply shaky. To take this idea seriously, we must also confront its strongest critics. The first and most fundamental objection is that quantum immortality is not a scientific theory at all, but an untestable philosophical speculation. A good scientific idea must be falsifiable, meaning there must be some conceivable observation or experiment that could prove it wrong. But what experiment could possibly disprove this? If you survive a dangerous situation, a believer can say it confirms the idea. If you die, well, you are not around to report the disconfirmation. From the outside, any pattern of survival looks like luck, and any death looks like the end of the experiment. This places it firmly in the realm of metaphysics, a compelling story about how reality might be structured, but one that makes no concrete predictions we can verify in a shared, objective way. It lives in the private space of subjective experience, which is by its very nature closed off to external verification. This leads directly to the second major criticism, the theory's complete dependence on one particular interpretation of quantum mechanics, the many worlds view. This is crucial to understand. The bizarre behavior of particles is a fact confirmed by countless experiments, but why they behave that way is an open question. The many worlds interpretation is just one of several competing explanations. Others, like the Copenhagen interpretation, do not require countless splitting universes. They suggest that superpositions simply collapse into a single outcome upon measurement, with the other possibilities vanishing into mathematical potential, not branching into physical reality. If the Copenhagen view or another alternative is correct, then the entire branching multiverse, the engine of quantum immortality, does not exist. Your consciousness is not hopping between worlds because there are no other worlds to hop to. The theory is built on a foundation that remains hotly debated within physics itself, a foundation that may not be real. Finally, and perhaps most damningly, the thought experiment makes a strange, almost magical exception for consciousness itself. It takes a physical process, quantum branching, and grafts onto it a non-physical rule that a subjective point of view must follow a continuous survival path. But why would consciousness get this special privilege? In our current scientific understanding, consciousness is almost certainly a product of physical processes in the brain. When the brain is destroyed, the conscious experience it generates ends. Quantum immortality, however, seems to treat consciousness as a kind of indestructible observer, a ghost in the machine that gets to choose its reality, which is a step back toward dualism, the old idea that mind and matter are separate substances. It asks physics to explain how the universe splits, but offers no physical mechanism for how consciousness selects its branch. This is the theory's greatest weakness. It solves the mystery of subjective continuity by introducing an even bigger mystery, a consciousness that stands apart from the very physical laws it is trying to use. These are not minor quibbles, they are serious, substantive reasons why most physicists regard quantum immortality as a fascinating thought experiment and little more. Acknowledging these criticisms is not a defeat for curiosity, it is a mark of intellectual honesty. It shows that we are not just weaving a comforting fantasy, but rigorously probing the limits of our knowledge. The value of the idea may not be in its truth, but in the stark questions it forces into the light. It pushes us to ask what we mean by reality, what we are willing to call evidence, and whether our current scientific frameworks are equipped to handle the first-person, subjective nature of existence itself. In wrestling with its flaws, we are not dismissing a mystery, we are defining its shape. From a single, startling click in a thought experiment's gun, we have traveled to the edge of time and the depths of the self. We have seen how a simple quantum rule could weave a thread of subjective experience so persistent it feels like immortality, only to watch that thread fray against the harsh critiques of science and the lonely horror of eternity. This journey reveals quantum immortality for what it truly is, not a blueprint of the cosmos, but a mirror. It is a lens carved from the glass of quantum theory and philosophical daring that we hold up to our most fundamental assumptions. When we look through it, the solid world of shared reality shimmers. The continuous self we cherish reveals itself as a pattern endlessly copied. Our inevitable death transforms into a doorway we may never personally walk through. The value of this exercise is not in proving we will live forever, but in questioning what forever and living even mean. It forces a confrontation with the nature of evidence itself, challenging whether the story we tell ourselves about our own lives can ever be fully trusted. It blurs the line between a miraculous survivor and a statistical inevitability, between a soul and a sustained pattern of information. In the end, the thought experiment leaves us not with answers, but with better, more unsettling questions. So here is where you come in. Look at the unbroken chain of your own experience, at the close calls and strange luck that have brought you to this exact moment. Which timeline do you think you are in? Are you the inevitable survivor riding a single thread through a branching multiverse? Or are you witnessing the only reality there is, a linear story moving toward a definitive end? Is the idea of quantum immortality terrifying to you, a curse of endless solitude? Is it comforting, a promise that your conscious story never truly ends? Or is it simply a fascinating puzzle, a tool to crack open the universe and peek at the strange gears inside? The comment section is now your laboratory. Share your perspective, your evidence, your own personal thought experiment. The conversation about who we are and where our story goes is just beginning.